Hey, good afternoon, all of you. It's a pleasure to be here once again this week. Talked with Dr. M.Hargis from the University of Arkansas. And we have also another beautiful guest here. She is a master student of Dr. M.Hargis. And today the idea is to talk about coccidiosis. This will be our topic today. I want to say welcome to all our participants that are at home in this COVID-19 and everybody that register yourself, people from Mexico, from Brazil, from all the world that are in touch with us today. And we have today also two of our people, Mariana and Glenn, that will be here and help us with your participation. So if you are at home and participating in your webinar, please send a hello to me. Then I know that you are on another side with us. So good afternoon, Dr. Billy and Taina. How are you doing these days?
Very well, thank you.
Doing well, thank you, Elizabeth.
So the topic today, it's about coccidiosis. And I remember 2 years ago, Billy, you are in Brazil, talked to us about the basic aspects of coccidiosis. And I remember when I asked you to talk about basic, you were a little sad. You say, what I'm saying about the basic of coccidiosis, right? But I love your presentation that time. And I would like to ask you to start with your idea that coccidiosis, it's basically a disease because we produce it, like we have a high productions of the animals.
Yeah, well, the Eimeria species and the wild jungle fowl or in wild turkeys is very well adapted to the host. And you don't see disease. It's the strategy of the parasite is such that when the chickens or turkeys shed oocysts, they're not infective immediately. It requires about 3 days for those to sporulate and become infective. And for that reason, it's unlikely for the same bird that shed them to pick them up in large numbers, because 3 days later they will have moved to a slightly different place. And so in the wild turkeys and wild chickens, they're never exposed to high numbers of infective oocysts, the sporulated oocysts. And so it's the infection has always been with us in terms of wild birds, wild turkeys, wild chickens, but the disease itself is really artificial. It's artificial from the standpoint of we put animals in very high numbers and close proximity to each other, so that those oocysts become infective and immediately it begins to cycle. And that's kind of the story. So it's a little bit of an artificial man-made disease. The pathogens were there, but commercial production has changed the environment so that these normally non-pathogenic parasites become very pathogenic, and it costs us a lot of money in terms of poultry production.
So Taina, you have something to add in this character of coccidiosis comes from nature, where normally in wild animals we don't have like disease. We have the parasite, but you don't have really disease. And then because of our system of productions of birds, we start to see disease and maybe not a clinical disease, but the subclinical signs with impact on feed conversions and weight gain.
Yeah, I think we can use even what is happening right now to think about coccidiosis. In a house, the chicken house, a poultry house, we cannot respect social distancing. So we have a huge agglomeration of birds, and of course, we are always respecting the density and all the regulations, but it's a fact that we have a huge agglomeration, so we don't have a dilution of the space and the birds. And for sure, it will be a problem for every pathogen. And in this case, Chimera, it's present everywhere. Almost all species of animals, they will have Chimera. But it's a problem in high doses. And everything, if you have a high number of that, a high concentration, will be a problem. So, yes.
So, what you have to talk to us about your impressions of coccidiosis in these days? How these are going?
I don't think I understood the question.
For example, in the clinical aspects, I know that you have contact with many poultry companies around the world. How is your visions? How is the disease on these days? How they are? They are clinical, they are subclinical. What is your visions? How coccidiosis are doing today?
Well, it's there probably won't be any real new breakthroughs in terms of chemicals or ionophores to control coccidia. One of the biggest problems is resistance to the ionophores and chemicals that are available. And then that becomes really a problem for companies that are, at least in North America, that are producing raised without antibiotic birds. And that's because of a technicality that is kind of silly, but it's the way it is. The ionophores are technically antibiotics, and therefore they cannot be used in antibiotic-free or ABF or raised without antibiotics. There's a number of different labels, but they're not allowed to use the ionophore drugs. And the problem is that while ionophores take quite a few generations to develop resistance, the Eimeria take quite a few generations to develop resistance to ionophores, such as monensin. The chemicals, often it's, according to Dr. Barta at the University of Ontario, it's sometimes just one base pair change genetically that confers resistance to some of the most important chemicals. And as such, the Eimeria are able to develop resistance to a chemical just in a very short period of time. And so I think it's especially a problem in broilers, for example, when we're trying to raise these broilers without antibiotics and unable to use the ionophores. They develop chemical resistance very quickly. And in those cases, some type of bioshuttle periodically really has to be used to regenerate the sensitivity of the Eimeria in the population to the chemicals that we have to use over and over again in those types of flocks. So vaccination is key. In the turkey industry, it's a little tougher because we don't have commercially available vaccines for most of the turkey Eimeria. And it's even worse because the Eimeria of turkeys often don't produce very distinct lesions. We don't see a lot of pathology when we perform a necropsy or post-mortem examination, and they tend to be overlooked. But if you look at studies where in turkeys you look at performance, Even some of those species like Amiria inocua, for example, that's thought to be innocuous, and really doesn't produce much in terms of lesions. We can get about a 25% hit and body weight gain just during the first cycle of Amiria during the 8 days after exposure. So economically, they're very important, but they're not recognized very well. And in turkeys, we've got tremendous resistance problems because we don't have the full gamut of species available as drug-sensitive species. And we're unable to regenerate or renew drug sensitivity in commercial turkeys. So it's even worse of a problem there. In longer-lived chickens, such as table-like production birds or broiler breeders, bioshuttles can be very effective where we actually vaccinate them very well at hatch. If we manage the environment so that they cycle, and then we can turn off the Amiria briefly and have lifelong immunity to all the important species and long-life chickens.
So, Billy, do you think that really will be the vaccine the future to control coccidiosis, or do you think we can do it with another molecules?
Well, I think that as long as we don't have a social-based reason to not use the chemicals that are available, or even better, the ionophores, as long as they can be used in terms of marketing strategy and appeal for consumers, I think the strategy that most people are going to choose is to periodically use vaccines or bioshuttles to renew sensitivity to the coccidiosis.
I basically, that because I work in R&D and coccidiosis is also a subject that I studied as a professor many years ago and following this. I really find good natural agents that really control. I have some good results in that. Do you have any information from literature or some products that have been you working in the lab that are natural, like plant extracts, or that you see as a future to control coccidiosis as well?
Well, we've screened quite a few products in our lab. We just completed one study where we did see some fairly meaningful effects on both performance and illicit shedding from a product that does not involve unnatural chemicals, or it does have some beneficial bacteria, I think. But that one was encouraging. At Ohio State has been screening some commercially available but unproven compounds, and she's found some successes with those. Is my video working?
Yes, your video is coming and goes, but now you are online. So in between you are organized, it's always these problems with technical, but I want to say hello to people that I know that is in online with us. I know that Abuto from Mexico, Carlos Perez, Emilio Reis, and I know that Emilio Cura from Colombia also is with us. Thank you so much for following us. And I'll follow this conversation with Tainá. Tainá, what do you have in your experience with coccidiosis? I know that you have been doing some training for people in Brazil about coccidiosis. What is the principal aspects that you cover when you did this training for people?
Well, in Brazil, we still don't have a lot of vaccination for coccidiosis. We are still beginning this process of the concept of vaccination for coccidiosis, but it's not a new concept. It's since the 50s, we have vaccines for coccidiosis. But till now, it's not, as Billy was saying, it's not only about the vaccine itself. We need the management of the environment, and it's when the equation can get a little bit more complex. But it's not actually complex. It's just about understanding the concept. But another point in Brazil as well, and other parts of the world, as Billy was mentioning, the antibiotic-free productions. Because ionophores, for example, they are classified as antibiotics here in the US. Then you go to European Union, and then they are only feed additives. In Brazil, they are also considered antibiotics. Then you cannot use when you have antibiotic-free production. So we have a little bit. I don't know about Canada. I don't remember, but we have this complication about the regulation. What is antibiotic? What we can use? What we cannot use? And about alternative compounds, the way that I see, it's promising. We have a lot of really good things, and not only thinking only about coccidiosis, because a lot of times the effect will be for intestinal health in general. So the product will provide like a stronger intestine. So the intestine will be more resistant, for example, to the invasion of sporozoites. But it will depend on the dose, for example. So I cannot say that one product, an alternative product, will work all the time. So I see that the problem is the lack of consistency. But this is what we have. We don't have the same dose, the same Imeria all the time. And sometimes it will work for one flock of animals, and the next one, it won't work. And that's why for coccidiosis, we need to implement different strategies. It's about using an alternative product because they work. It's a fact, and it's an awesome option for this time without antibiotics. But we cannot rely only in one option. We need the vaccine and understand the concept of vaccination for coccidiosis, because it would be, for us, when we talk about vaccine, we think, oh, if I give the vaccine once, oh, that's perfect. The animal is protected. And it's not the case for coccidiosis. So yeah, understanding all these different concepts for coccidiosis and trying to implement different strategies, I think, is the key to avoid or to decrease the incidence of coccidiosis.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of hope in some of the natural compounds, the essential oils and aromatic oils. There's hope. I think in many cases there's more story than there is fact. And there needs to be a little more research to know exactly how to use them and what their efficacy is and how to use them in a useful way. And right now, unfortunately, so it's fortunate and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that they're not it's fortunate they're not regulated because that keeps a cost factor out of the market and allows creativity. The other side of the coin is we have many companies promoting things that are not proven, and there's not much data on. And I think that some of the companies are more ethical than others and produce a more consistent product, time after time. and others are at least cost sourcing the ingredients from around the world, and sometimes the thymol concentration varies widely from one batch to the next. And in those cases, it could be that some variable problems actually reduce the ability of companies that do have good quality control and consistent products to be able to really make inroads, because the purchaser, the direct poultry industry that buys these, well, if it's a essential oil product and this product claims to have the same components as another product and it's cheaper, well, they go to the cheaper. And sometimes they don't know that, perhaps one product has been diluted in corn oil and the other one is not. And there's no real way to understand that, I think, at this point. And so time will tell. And as you said, Tina, with the vaccination, I mean, the key to vaccination is being able to achieve those first 2 cycles. So some percentage of the birds are vaccinated at hatch, and yes, you can get better than 90% take, if you will, with vaccine application, but often it's much lower than that in the hands of hatchery management. And so if you have, for example, 70% exposure at hatch, then you've got 30% of those animals that did not see Eimeria when they hit the ground. And they're not going to see Eimeria until about 8 days later, as the oocysts are shed, and then they mature. They sporulate for about 3 days, so about 5 days before shedding, about 3 days before they become infected. So that would be the next cycle. And for that to happen, we have to have moisture, we have to have warmth, and that's kind of a hard concept to get across to our colleagues that have been raising poultry their whole lives, that you need moisture. Well, we've been fighting moisture our entire lives, but without that moisture, the Eimeria will not cycle. And until they've been exposed 2 to 3 times, they're not going to be solidly immune. And so you need to maintain that cycling for at least the first 2 cycles. So for about 16 days, more or less.
So I think here we talk important aspects about the environment. So environment conditions is important in this aspect. And for example, one situation that I look at is that when we are testing product against coccidiosis, normally we test in an experimental farm, sometimes doing a challenge like with wide oocytes. It's different of vaccine because to control vaccine is not the same. So we need to be sure that it's wide oocytes to inoculate the animals. But one thing that I saw is that even when you talk about vaccine, or when you're talking about natural products that control coccidiosis, you can see that one flock to another flock, you are affecting the environment. Well, what I mean, if you use a vaccine, I'm expecting in the next flock to have a less shed of oocytes that we're going to help the second flock with the vaccine. I just want to talk that one of you, maybe Tina or Dr. Hargis, if can you just close the mic? Maybe we are having some, close the mic for a while, just, okay? Okay, so this is gonna help. And then when you talk, you open, then we avoid the echoes because this is a little noise. So what I saw in these conditions when we are testing these different products, and we have very good results lately with these products. But what I saw is that in vaccine, or when you are using this natural product, it's not like the last coccidiostat. So what I mean is, like, you are having one flock, we have reductions in the shedding of oocytes. So I expect that next flock will be better, and then later and later on. So what I mean is that sometimes in hazardous conditions, we are not really able to evaluate either vaccine or either these natural compounds, because we're not, we supposed to have a following flocks to have the best activity of these compounds. How do you feel about that? Because I think that you need to rethink how we evaluate these natural solutions when you think about coccidiosis. What is your impression about that? Billy, you need to put your mic on. This is
details.
Yeah, I do it because it's the way. Sorry.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I have seen data on several products that at first blush you would say the effect with direct challenge is not very impressive. But if you actually look at the curve of shedding, actually doing total oocyst output counts on day 4, day 5, day 6 after challenge, and you look at the area under the curve, and you see that the total oocyst output is markedly reduced. The product may not protect against the direct challenge, but the effect may be the reduced amplification of oocysts in the environment. And to that extent, that may be really true, that the effect may be cumulative, at least in the U.S., perhaps not in Canada, where there's clean out every flock. But on built-up litter, the effect may be cumulative over the course of 2 flocks, rather than just the first flock that's treated.
Yes, the way that I see, we sometimes, all the time, I guess, we focus a lot in animal health, right? But then we forget that in the case of poultry, we have another living organism, that is the house. So the litter is another living organism that we have to take care. It's not, I can have the perfect chicken, the perfect turkey, the best genetics, the best nutrition, but if you don't take care of your environment, you have nothing. And I guess for coccidiosis, this is very, very true. We have to take care and manage the litter, and then we can take care of the birds. What happens to the chickens, turkeys, breeders, layers is a consequence of the environment. So we have to take care and think more about this another living organism that we that work a lot with animal health, sometimes we think, oh, the bird physiology, the bird immunology, but it's about maybe the litter. It's about managing the litter, managing ventilation, and knowing your house.
Well, I love your participation here, Tainá, with these visions of the litter is a new a living organism inside the production system. This is a very nice, because lately I'm working and reading a lot about symbiosis. The concept of symbiosis that have been done by Lynn Morigulis, and talk a lot about how the organisms cooperate, how they cooperate together to find the best balance between the different microorganisms. And I think that even the situations that we are living today with COVID-19, it's something like that. So I love to see young brains like you to have these visions, and I think this is so nice, because I really appreciate to talk about the litter as a new organism, because this new organism will make us really understand it, will make us more efficient. And we are almost by the end of our meeting today. And before I end, I would like to ask you, two of you, to finalize with a final message. But I would also address that as us, as a scientist, could thinking how to evaluate coccidiosis and strategies to control coccidiosis and this vision of the litter as a new organism, because it's not like to just put a trial, finalize and say that this is done. If you put this organism in that, we have an echo. Probably some of you have the mic open. I need to have
mic. Sorry.
Thank you. So this is in these situations that we have the litter as an important component to control coccidiosis, and I think it's not just coccidiosis. When you think about this, the reductions of antibiotics use, we need to address to the litter as a component important, to the environment as an important component in that. So as a final message, I want you to of course, leave your message how to control the coccidiosis strategy, but also what is your thoughts about the future of the evaluation for coccidiosis, for strategy for coccidiosis control, once we need to also take in account the environment, and the environment is not one trial, but a following of trials. So I would like to see your visions in this. Billy, the mic.
I got it.
I need to remember.
I don't know necessarily the future, but I think you're both absolutely right on the impact of the microbial environment in which birds are placed. There's a phenomenon that's been known for decades, known as the new house or new litter paradox. And performance on softwood shavings is always just very consistently poor on the first flock that goes through. And this is something that there are two hypotheses that are probably both partially true. One hypothesis has to do with terpenes and terpines that are off-gassed when fresh softwood shavings are added. That's pretty much discounted these days with the type of hardwood shaving or the softwood shavings that we have there. They are really kiln dried very hard, and there's very little aromatic that you can detect in the softwood shavings that we use these days. The more likely hypothesis is the beneficial microflora that continue from one flock to the next on built-up litter. And it is really striking and a paradox, I think, that you can have built-up litter and you'll actually get better performance on average than you will with new litter, fresh litter. And that's a penalty that our colleagues in Canada pay because of the rules there. I mean, there's other reasons to do that other than just performance, but it is problematic. Our colleague, Memo Tejas, has really embraced the coevolution aspect of gut microflora with vertebrate animals. And there's a lot of papers that pretty strongly support that these gut-adapted commensals, the beneficial bacteria that colonize the gut of animals, the humans, have co-evolved with their vertebrate species. And there really is no niche for most of the beneficial bacteria within the gut of the chicken, except chickens and or other vertebrate animals, and the same with humans. And so the genetics of these organisms would not exist if they had not co-evolved with the animal species that they've co-evolved with. And I think it's pretty well known now that the number of bacteria, just the bacterial population itself within the microbiota of the gut, is orders of magnitude more cells than the animal has, and maybe 10 times more genes than the animal has. And if you look at chickens or any other species that are raised in completely germ-free environments, notobiotic it's called, where they're not allowed exposure to any bacteria, their performance is horrible. You could barely grow piglets or chickens in the absence of normal microflora. So there's a lot of work to be done in that area. How do you promote the beneficial microflora without and still manage the pathogens that are going to be in that environment? And we're not there yet, but we know that it's true. I mean, there's the normal microflora is absolutely essential for optimal performance and development of immunity and so forth. I didn't speak to the future. I'll leave that for Tina. She has more view of the future than I do.
For coccidiosis, I wish I could give a simple solution and just, you have to do just one thing and then you don't have problems with coccidiosis. No, you have to have different strategies and put all these strategies together. The most important thing is to understand why you have to put all together. For example, understand that you have resistance to drugs, to ionophores, to chemicals, and then you need to use the vaccine, for example, to reintroduce this sensibility to these amazing tools that we have that are the anti-coccidios. So you have to understand first that and manage both of these tools that we have. For sure, for all disease, we have to understand that we need biosecurity, we need to control pests, we need to have all this house management. And so it's not simple, it's complex but not difficult. The message is you have to understand why. And when you know why, you can, for example, explain to producers, you can explain to workers in the company. And when everybody knows why we have to do this, it's much easier to do. It's not only, why humidity in the first week? Why I need moisture in my litter in the first week? If you know why, then it's much easier. The second point is about litter. Actually, we don't know what is done to the litter. We have different tools. We have acidifiers, we have in-house composting, we have different tools. But okay, what is the impact to, for example, the sporulation of the oocysts from the vaccine? It will impact the sporulation. Can this somehow reduce the effectiveness of the vaccine? We don't know. We actually don't know. And maybe we should have more guidelines and know what is the best thing to be done to the litter. For sure, we will never get this answer because each house is a different environment, is a different weather, a different location in the world. Our industry is universal, so it's difficult to have only one guideline, but at least a better understanding what can be done, what is the consequence for what I have, for my house, for my weather, my conditions. This is what I can do. So I think we need more understanding about what is done to the litter and what are the consequences to the environment.
So I agree with both of you in this.
Yeah, I think that's basically right. For example, some companies, even in broiler chickens, and at first blush, you don't think vaccines would be very useful for broilers. It's going to take 16, 20 days, something like that, to really develop immunity. And, some of our birds are being processed only a couple of weeks after that, right? So it's how can that work? But some companies have made vaccination very effective and just using vaccination alone. Other companies cannot make a bioshuttle work, and they just can't do it. It just depends completely on Coccidiosis. And I think it is management, and it is kind of a basic understanding. I saw a videotape that was from a producer in Canada who was making vaccination work for his birds. And this was in Ontario in the wintertime. And it's almost impossible when you're bringing cold air in and you're warming that up to appropriate temperature to brood chicks. And you say we need moisture in the litter. Well, that air is so dry and it's so, impossible to accumulate moisture. He had actually, he was doing partial house brooding, but it really had crowded these birds to a fairly small space and then blocked off the rest of the house. And he was actually fogging water into that environment. And he was able to make the vaccinations. And I think he was growing pullets. I believe that was what he was. So they've got time, to make the vaccine work, really well and save money. But some people have gone to extremes to make it work, and you can make it work. But yes, if you don't have moisture and warmth, they will not mature. They will not sporulate, and therefore they won't cycle. And if they don't cycle, later in life, when a few oocysts do survive and amplify, that's when we have the crisis of clinical coccidiosis, close to harvest or at much more economically devastating ages. And so, for those long live birds like breeders or table egg production birds, it's really important that they become immune during the pullet rearing period, the first few weeks.
So thank you so much. We are almost 45 minutes here already talking to people, so we are really going to the end. And I appreciate your...
Elizabeth, you need to turn your microphone on now.
Okay, sorry. I was like Billy right now. So I'm saying that we are going to the end of our talking, and people are following up us for almost 45 minutes now. But as a summary, I think that it will become very clear that coccidiosis is a problem that will not solve with drugs anymore. We need really to work in situations where we can manage the environment, the cleaning, the litter, and to organize a new strategy. But also, again, every week I come to almost the same conclusion here, Billy and Tainá, is that the research should work very close to the field. We need to find ways that we can exchange more our ideas, because I have been in the university for many years. Yeah, everybody knows about that. And we know that we have limitations in your trial conditions, because we cannot simulate what is to renew the litter many times as people has in field. So I think that it's become the time that we need to work in the symbiotic way, the field, to work with the researchers, with the companies, and try to find the solutions, put together the information that we have from them, because there is the reality and there is the way that we can learn. So this is my visions of what we are learning about gut health in general, not just coccidiosis, right? So thank you so much for you. Thank you, Tainá. Thank you, Billy, for this beautiful conversation.
Thank you, and I want to send a hello to my friend, Dr. Romero in Colombia, who's watching this presentation. So,
Oh, thank you, people from Colombia. Thank you, people from Latin America. And I would like to inform you that next week we have here in a different day. I ask you to close the microphone. And the different days next week, we have on Wednesday at 10 a.m. Quebec time, we have Kirk Claessing talk about the requirements for inflammation, the nutrients requirements for inflammations. That is a follow-up of it. And I would like also say that we have on Wednesday, on Thursday at 1:30, a discussion about Salmonella. And it's a different vision of Salmonella from a professor from Washington University, Dr. Shah Devendra, and he'll talk about how the Salmonella are using nutrients from the diet to grow. So it's a very nice, interesting aspect as well. And probably we'll be back here talking about litter, because I thought that litter is an important topic. So I will find a specialist, and I have one in mind that I invited to come here and talk about litter and how you can manage it for the future. Thank you so much, guys, and I hope you talk to you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.